All right. So, you brought us quite the case this time.
Yeah, definitely a head scratcher.
The Katau murders back in 2014.
Mm.
We've got articles, we've got social media threads, we've even got an audio documentary. It seems like this one's really grabbed you.
Oh, yeah, and for a good reason, too, because
Well,
this isn't just your average crime story.
right.
The amount of international attention it got, all the different stories, the brutality of it all. There's just so much to unpack.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start with the basics. We've
Okay.
got Hannah Witheridge. She was 23, a speech therapist from England.
Mm.
And David Miller, 24, an engineering student from Jersey.
Right.
Both on vacation, just soaking up the sun in what should have been paradise.
Yeah, it's that contrast that really gets you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Katau, this beautiful island known for its beaches, the relaxed vibe, affordable prices, a backpacker's dream,
Right.
and it all turned into a nightmare.
Yeah, and the crime itself was just horrific.
Absolutely.
Their bodies were found on Sari Beach, one of the most popular spots on the island.
Right.
Hannah had been brutally attacked and sexually assaulted.
Oof, it's terrible.
And David had suffered severe head injuries and drowned.
You can see how the pressure to solve this thing quickly would affect things,
Oh, for sure.
especially with Thailand's tourism industry at stake.
Right.
It seems like investigators may have prioritized a quick arrest over, a really thorough investigation.
Yeah.
The crime scene was mishandled. Evidence was potentially contaminated. It's just not a good look.
Yeah, not at all. And you also have to factor in the political climate at the time.
Oh, right.
Thailand was under martial law, and the tourism industry was already facing some challenges. A high-profile murder case like this could have been devastating for them.
Absolutely. And that context is so crucial to understanding the decisions that were made during this investigation.
Yeah.
Early on, suspicion fell on David's friend, Chris. He was traveling with him.
Okay.
He had hand injury, and there was some conflicting evidence there.
Wouldn't clearing him so quickly, despite that conflicting evidence, raise some concerns about how thorough the investigation actually was?
It definitely does. And the documentary you shared even mentions a blonde hair found in Hannah's hand,
Oh, wow.
which obviously didn't match David, but could match Chris.
Huh.
And despite this, Chris was allowed to leave Thailand after providing a DNA sample, which cleared him.
So it seems like they were really eager to move on from that lead.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
Okay, so then the focus shifted to Burmese migrant workers.
Right.
We see mass DNA collection raids on their homes. It almost feels like there's a sense of desperation in the investigation at this point.
What's really striking here is how this all taps into the existing social dynamics in Thailand.
Yeah.
Burmese migrants often face a lot of discrimination.
Right, yeah.
They're very vulnerable within Thai society.
It's easy to see how they become easy targets then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got all this pressure to find someone to blame.
Right, and the documentary brings up this chilling story about a friend of David's, a musician named Sean McKenna. He actually fled Katau after being threatened by some local men.
Wow, I don't remember that.
Yeah, and one of those men was connected to this influential Dawishian family. They're often called the mafia of the island.
That's scary.
Yeah, it is. That detail about Sean McKenna fleeing the island after being threatened is just unsettling.
It really is.
It hints at this much darker undercurrent running through this supposed paradise.
You have to wonder then, were the police really trying to get justice for Hannah and David, or were they trying to protect these powerful interests?
That's a good question.
That theme just keeps popping up the more we dig into this case.
Yeah, okay, so we've got a mishandled crime scene, we've got a vulnerable community being targeted, and then these whispers of powerful figures in the background. What happens next?
Well, the Dawichian family was definitely on the radar,
Right.
especially Mon Dawichian.
Okay.
They owned a lot of businesses on Sari Beach,
Uh-huh.
including the AC bar that was the last place Hannah and David were seen alive. There's even footage of Mon at the crime scene.
Really?
Yeah, like shortly after the bodies were found, just walking around inside the cordoned off area.
Wait, so the owner of the bar where the victims were last seen is just casually strolling around the crime scene?
It definitely raised some eyebrows.
I'd say so. It's incredibly suspicious.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
But despite all the speculation, the police eventually cleared the Dawichians, said there wasn't enough evidence to link them to the crime.
Okay, so we have these powerful figures with potential connections to the crime, but the police come up empty-handed.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks after the murders, 2 Burmese migrant workers, Zalin and Waifio, are arrested.
Yeah.
It feels like the investigation just took this sharp turn.
It did, and the whole narrative around the case changed completely.
Yeah.
Zalin and Waifio confessed to the murders, supposedly motivated by sexual jealousy after seeing Hannah and David kissing on the beach.
Okay.
They were paraded in front of the media reenacting the crime.
Really?
Yeah, it's common practice in Thailand. Well, it's pretty jarring to see as an outsider, though.
That public reenactment detail is just wild.
Yeah.
Imagine the pressure on those two young men.
I know.
Forced to perform a crime they may not have even committed in front of a crowd and cameras.
It definitely raises questions about how reliable those confessions actually are,
For sure.
especially in a context where, coercion and intimidation are very real possibilities.
Right. But the police had their narrative.
They did?
And along with the confessions, they claimed to have DNA evidence linking Zhao Lin and Wai Fio to the crime scene.
Right. Their DNA was supposedly found on the murder weapon.
Okay.
And on cigarette butts, and Wi-Fi was even found with David's stolen iPhone.
So we've got confessions, we've got DNA evidence. Sounds like an open and shut case, right?
Not so fast.
Oh.
The documentary you shared goes into a lot of detail about the inconsistencies with the confessions and the forensic evidence.
Like what?
Well, for example, could Zalin and Wi-Fi really have overpowered David?
Right.
They were both pretty small. David was much larger and athletic.
That's a good point.
And why didn't they flee the island after the crime?
Yeah, those are great points. And the alleged motive also seems a little iffy.
Yeah.
Does sexual jealousy really explain such brutal violence?
And then there are the concerns about the DNA evidence.
Right.
There are allegations that the results were rushed, that there wasn't much transparency in handling the evidence,
Okay.
and even a possibility of contamination or, manipulation.
And then there's those reports of torture and coercion during the interrogation process.
Oh, right.
A questionable translator denial of legal representation accounts of physical abuse.
Yeah, it's a really disturbing picture of how those confessions might have been obtained.
It sounds like this case was far from straightforward.
It really wasn't.
And when you consider everything we've talked about,
Yeah.
the pressure to solve the case quickly,
Mm-hmm.
the targeting of a vulnerable community,
Right.
the whispers of these powerful figures influencing the investigation.
It makes you wonder if the pursuit of justice was really the priority here.
So we've gone from this paradise island to a potential cover-up,
Yeah.
forced confessions, and questionable DNA evidence. This is getting heavy.
It is.
So where do we go from here? So we're left with this labyrinth of unanswered questions and possibilities. Where do we even begin to unpack the trial and everything that came after?
Well, the trial itself was quite the spectacle, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Tons of international media attention, this complicated legal system,
Right.
and a defense team that faced so many obstacles
Yeah.
trying to access evidence challenging the prosecution's narrative.
And in the middle of all this, you've got the testimony of Dr. Pontip. He was a respected forensic pathologist,
Right.
and he raised some serious doubts about that DNA evidence.
Yeah, he suggested it could have been contaminated or mishandled.
That testimony was huge.
It really was.
It highlighted these inconsistencies and potential flaws in the prosecution's case.
Yeah, gave a little bit of hope for Zalin and Waifeo.
But it wasn't enough.
No,
Right.
unfortunately not.
Despite all the concerns, all the inconsistencies, they were found guilty
Right.
and sentenced to death. Imagine that.
I know.
Knowing the whole world thinks you're a murderer,
Yeah.
facing execution for something you say you didn't do.
The international outcry was intense.
Oh, yeah. Calls to boycott Thailand, accusations of a miscarriage of justice?
It became a symbol of corruption
Yeah.
and all the problems within the Thai legal system.
It makes you think about Katau,
Mm-hmm.
this place that seems so idyllic,
Right.
but justice can be so elusive there.
It can.
And power dynamics really influence the pursuit of truth.
Absolutely. But that's not where the story ends, is it?
No, it doesn't. The documentary you shared goes on to talk about other suspicious deaths and disappearances.
Right.
Tourists on Katau,
Like Ben Harrington,
Nick Pearson.
Dmitry Povs, Christina Ansley, Luke Miller.
Yeah, each one shrouded in mystery.
So many unanswered questions.
It really makes you wonder.
It does.
Are these just isolated incidents, or is there something more going on? It's like a bad dream repeating over and over.
Yeah.
Unexplained deaths, allegations of foul play.
And that consistent lack of thorough investigation.
Right, it feels like there's this culture of silence on the island.
It does, doesn't it?
Like nobody wants to challenge the powerful people there.
Yeah, they don't want to jeopardize the tourism industry.
And they'd rather present this image of safety and paradise instead of pursuing truth and justice. It's scary to think about that this beautiful island might have this hidden darkness.
It is.
Something that's been ignored or covered up.
But there are those fighting for justice.
Yeah, absolutely. Groups like anonymous journalists like Suzanne Buchanan.
And, of course, the families of the victims.
They're all searching for answers.
It's inspiring.
It is. And speaking of threats, the source material even mentions Suzanne Buchanan being threatened with arrest.
Seriously.
Yeah, because of her reporting on an alleged rape case on Katau.
It shows you the risk of challenging the official story.
Exactly. Especially when you have powerful people involved.
It's all about silencing dissent and hiding information that could hurt Thailand's tourism.
But despite the risks,
Yeah.
the families of Hannah and David and advocates all over the world, they kept fighting.
They did, and they got results.
Yeah, in 2019, Zalin and Waifio's death sentences were commuted to life in prison.
It's a victory of sorts.
It is, but it's bittersweet because they still maintain their innocence.
Yeah, it shows how complicated this whole thing is.
It does.
Even with a reduced sentence, they still carry the weight of that wrongful conviction. And the bigger questions about the investigation, the trial, the other suspicious deaths, those are all still unanswered.
So here we are at the end of our deep dive, and we're left with this feeling of unease. The image of Katau is shattered.
It's been replaced by this mess of tragedy, injustice, and unanswered questions.
What does it all mean for us, the listeners?
It really challenges us to think critically about the information we take in,
About the stories we're told.
and to see the power dynamics at play.
Especially in cases like this where the stakes are so high.
Right, where it's hard to tell what's true and what's manipulation.
It also makes you think about our role as travelers,
Yeah.
as global citizens,
What are our responsibilities when we visit these places with complicated histories?
where human rights are a concern.
Can we enjoy the beauty of a place and still acknowledge the darker side?
Can we advocate for ethical practices and demand accountability even when we're on vacation?
That's a tough question.
It is. Maybe this whole case shows us that paradise doesn't really exist.
Maybe right.
It's something we create,
Yeah.
something shaped by our actions.
Both good and bad.
And those actions have consequences.
They always do.
Well, we've covered a lot today.
We have.
We went from this picture-perfect island to a web of crime, corruption, and the fight for justice.
Quite a journey.
It was for those of you who want to learn more and explore all the different perspectives on this case. We've got links in the show notes.
There's so much information out there.
Yeah, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. Keep questioning, keep exploring.
And keep demanding justice no matter how difficult it seems.
Sometimes the most beautiful places hide the darkest secrets.
And it's up to us to bring those secrets into the light.